What's up, guys? Just like I've been doing the past couple of weeks, today we're going to be recapping the third and final week of Saints OTAs. There's not as much going on this week as there have been in weeks past. We had some big Michael Thomas updates. Last week we had a lot of news about Jarvis Landry. We had some big media coverage of him. There's not as much media coverage to speak of as there was really the past couple of OTAs because there's not as much really going on. I guess the buzz around Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry have kind of died down a little bit. So what we've been mostly noticing, or at least the media has been some of these undrafted and kind of lower on the depth chart kind of players. So today we're going to kind of talk about that for a little bit, and today we're also going to discuss at the end of the video some mandatory minicamp updates, which is kind of like OTAs, but it's next week, and it's not technically OTAs because instead of it being voluntary, it's mandatory. So we got some updates going on, specifically to Michael Thomas. So I'll bring that up towards the end of the video. But the first thing I want to highlight and briefly mention, because like I said, it's not going to be as long of a video probably because there's less to talk about. But one of the very few things that was discussed was that at the end of practice, undrafted free agent wide receiver Kirk, I got his name pulled up on my laptop, Kirk Merritt. I'm sorry, this guy's new to me, so I literally did not remember his name. On the very last play of practice, he caught a goal line fade touchdown pass from Ian Book, that's good to see. I mean, I'm not really sure who this guy was. I kind of looked at some OTA footage after practice was over, and apparently this guy's wearing number 85. I don't know how long he's been with the team. I thought maybe he was a tight end at first glance, and from what I've heard from around the media, Saints media, but he is a wide receiver apparently. I'm not sure we're going to see much from him, especially because the wide receiver room is very crowded at the moment. And signing Jarvis Landry and drafting Chris Olave and having a healthy Michael Thomas, if that's the case, does not help his case at all. So you probably end up seeing him on the practice squad. Maybe we'll get to see some of him in the preseason, which would be good to see. But apparently Ian Book has also been showing some flashes in OTAs, which a lot of people are quick to kind of write off Ian Book. But as of right now, he's probably going to be you're probably looking at the third string quarterback in Ian Book. And most people are quick to, judge Ian Book based off of that Dolphins game we saw. But to me, that Dolphins game should not count for anything because literally at least a good half of the team was out because of COVID. And as injured as the Saints already were, that did not help them. I believe our starting offensive lineup in that game was Ian Book. Alvin Kamara is probably the only legitimate starter in there because you didn't have Teron Armstead or Ryan Ramczyk that game. I'm not even sure if Mark Ingram was playing that game. I'm trying to think. Who were the receivers? Marquez Callaway. I don't even know if Traquan Smith played that game, to be honest with you. I don't think he did, as a matter of fact. I don't think he played that game. Taysom Hill had COVID. Simeon had COVID, which is why, Ian Book started that game. I mean, there was nothing to speak of there. I think Lil Jordan Humphrey started at the other receiver spot. I think we saw Quan Baker, Saints 7th round draft pick. That was one of the very few times you saw him during the season. I'm not sure if we saw him ever again. He even played receiver. He played special teams. That's how low in the depth chart we were in wide receivers. You probably won't see Kirk Merritt much at all, especially during the regular season, unless we're just that much in a bind in terms of injuries. But let's pray that that does not happen again because last season was awful in terms of the injuries. But Ian Book's been showing some good progression and development in practice. I mean, there's not much you can really say. It's not like, he's not going to be a Hall of Famer or anything, nothing like that. He's our third-string quarterback, and he's behind Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. So I'm sure we'll get a great look at him in the preseason, and we'll get some more info on him. Another player I want to briefly mention is third-year undrafted wide receiver Marquez Callaway, who we saw a lot of in the regular season this year because he was kind of forced to play that number one wide receiver role since Michael Thomas was out the whole year. And most people will say, oh, well, Traquan Smith was the number one receiver. First of all, Traquan Smith didn't even play the full season. He didn't even start playing until, I believe, the Bucs game. Or no, it was the Seahawks game. He started in the Seahawks game. And I think he missed some time after that, too. He was banged up really most of the year. And he even played the number one receiver spot. We saw a lot of the time teams' best corners would travel with Marquez Callaway because he kind of played that X receiver role. So apparently, according to the Saints media, this is where I get all my info from, Marquez Callaway has been showing great development in terms of his route running. His routes look crisp, and just a lot of things really show a big leap for Marquez Callaway, which is kind of unfortunate for him not that he's progressing, but the fact that the Saints made all these moves at wide receiver, so he won't be in that starting role. Obviously, we all know Marquez Callaway is not a starting caliber number one receiver, but I'm not going to lie, I was kind of excited to see him at the number 2 or number 3 spot possibly, but now that we got Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry, you probably will see him at the 4 spot, and some people will say, well, Deontay Hardy will be in that spot, but I think the Saints really want to see Deontay Hardy at special teams mostly, and he mostly played wide receiver last year because of the fact that we had no wide receivers. So I'm not sure Deontay Hardy will be getting as much time on offense this season. He probably won't. You probably see Marquez Callaway at that number 4 spot if I had to guess. But this guy was an undrafted free agent from the 2020 season, so that's when he was a rookie. And not much was expected out of him. We didn't really see anything from him in that 2020 season until Michael Thomas was out for a while, and I think Emmanuel Sanders was also out too. So the Saints were really thin at wide receiver. It was pretty much Traquan Smith, a few other guys, and Marquez Callaway, and no one really thought anything of Marquez Callaway. But I remember we played the Carolina Panthers at home in the 2020 season, and Drew Brees was just throwing to Marquez Callaway, it felt like every play. I don't know if he got 100 yards in that game, but he was the guy. And that was a game that Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders both missed, because remember, we did have Emmanuel Sanders a couple years ago. But Marquez Callaway showing great progression, and since there's such little expected of him, you can't really... What he's done, considering the expectations for him have been next to nothing, have been really good. Now, we have expectations for him now, obviously, but what he's shown you, especially the fact that he actually managed half-ass as a number 1 receiver last year, I believe he got about 700 yards. Now, the whole year he wasn't good. He was very inconsistent at times, but when he had great moments, he had great moments. We saw the touchdown he had against New England when he absolutely mossed one of the defenders in the end zone when Jameis Winston just threw up a prayer because no one was open. We saw that Hail Mary against Washington, and no one on Washington really jumped up for the ball. But still, he caught a Hail Mary, so that's pretty cool. Especially at the end of the season, when you really saw Marquez Callaway develop into what the Saints really think he can be at wide receiver, especially in that second Tampa Bay game when he went for damn near 100 yards in just the first quarter. And even in that the second Carolina game, I believe he also had a good game. I think he was also over 100 yards that game. So you really seen Marquez Callaway show progression. There's been some debate among Saints fans recently as of who is better, Traquan Smith or Marquez Callaway. And if you legitimately think that's a debate, you're probably wrong, because Marquez Callaway is by far the better receiver, especially considering the fact that Traquan Smith was a 3rd-round pick and Marquez Callaway was an undrafted free agent. He's already shown you a lot more, and he's shown the ability to stay healthy and stay on the field. Traquan Smith is not healthy. He's never on the field. But when he is on the field, the most you see is just Pretty much all you get from Traquan Smith is, on a good day, 3 catches, 30 yards, maybe a touchdown. That's it. Not that impactful. Now, when he has a good game, he shows up in big moments, but it's not enough. It's not to the level of Marquez Callaway, in my opinion. So, yeah, I would expect to see some pretty good things from Marquez Callaway. Obviously, he probably won't be getting the snaps that he was getting last year, but this is good to see just in case Michael Thomas isn't 100%. Now, I think we're going to talk about Michael Thomas a little later, but I don't think it's a big... I wouldn't expect Michael Thomas to not be 100%. I think we should expect to see him back and good to go, but just on the hypothetical situation that something goes wrong, you have Marquez Callaway that can step in at number 2 or number 3. Another thing I want to briefly mention, Saints running back Mark Ingram was present in OTAs today. He wasn't really... I don't think he was there for the first 2 weeks of OTAs. Now, I'm not sure if there was an injury, because remember, he was dealing with that... I'm not sure what the injury was. Ankle, probably, because that's one of the most common injuries we've seen. I'm not sure if he's been dealing with injury or he just hasn't been showing up because it's voluntary. That's my guess, is because it's voluntary. But he was at OTAs, which is good to see. I don't believe Alvin Kamara was there. I'm sure we'll see Alvin Kamara during mandatory minicamp next week, but we're going to kind of go into that in a second. But we're going to kind of get into the mandatory minicamp updates in a second. I'm sure I'll also make a recap video about that, because I'm sure we'll see a lot of guys show up that we haven't seen. But one of the things I want to briefly mention or kind of discuss before we talk about mandatory minicamp is what was honestly the best move the Saints have made in the offseason. A lot of people would say, maybe drafting Chris Olave, signing Tyrann Mathieu or Jarvis Landry, but I disagree with all of that. I think the best offseason move the Saints have made has been the one that they didn't make, and that was trading for Deshaun Watson. At the very beginning of the offseason, we saw the Saints show that they were going to be aggressive and they were willing to make, quote, roster-changing moves in order to make a trade happen with Deshaun Watson. Now, I was one of the very first people that did not want this to happen. One of the rumored trades that the Saints were proposing to, not the Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, because that's the team he was originally on, was that they were going to trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson and several first-round draft picks. Now, I was the first person to tell you I did not want this. If you know me, you know that I wanted Jameis Winston the whole time. And as things have turned out, it's basically the best-case scenario. The Saints signed Jameis Winston to a cheap 2-year contract, and they had all this leftover money to make these moves that they have made, such as trading for another first-round pick so they can get Chris Olave and Trevor Penning in the first round, address their two top needs. They also got Tyrann Mathieu. They got Marcus May. They was filled in both safety spots that we needed because, remember, Marcus Williams went to the Ravens and Malcolm Jenkins retired. And the Saints also signed Jarvis Landry. So they have had basically all this leftover money that they wouldn't have had or they were able to spend because they cleared up about $30 million in cap space, which is what they were going to need to get Deshaun Watson. But instead of getting Deshaun Watson, they used all this money to fill in key spots on the roster, which is why now people, at least smart people, believe the Saints are a playoff team. And I also think the Saints are a playoff team. And I think the Saints have a legitimate shot to win the NFC South. Now, I'm sure we'll talk about this more in another video because I kind of want to save that and go into a deeper dive in terms of the NFC South and all that later on. But the Saints roster is looking really good right now, and this is in large part to Deshaun Watson not being there. And even Cleveland kind of fucked themselves in terms of getting Deshaun Watson because now he has 24 lawsuits against him. It's not just 22, now it's 24. And even in OTAs, if you've seen these clips, Deshaun Watson's not looking good. He's looking very rusty. And he might not even play this season just because of all the legal stuff going on. It's been dragging on for so long, and especially me, and I'm sure most fans do not want to deal with this. I would much rather have Jameis and know what we're going to have to deal with. We're going to know who's on the field. The worst thing we have to deal with in terms of legal situations is Alvin Kamara, but that's nowhere near a year long or anything suspension. We pretty much know what's going to go on there. He's probably going to miss a few games, but he's still going to be on the field this season, I'm sure. So I wouldn't panic about that. I'm sure that's all going to be fine. But the best offseason move the Saints have made was definitely the one they did not make because Deshaun Watson's not even looking that good. And not to mention they paid him a fully 5 years, $250 million or $230 million guaranteed contract, something like that. A fully guaranteed contract, the first and only in NFL history. That is absurd, especially with the uncertainty going around Deshaun Watson. You do not give him that kind of money. And that's why the Saints kind of back down because they ain't doing that shit. Especially with a player that's just so uncertain. Not to mention he hasn't played in a year, and you've kind of seen that he's not been that good in practice. You don't want to take a chance, especially with a fully guaranteed contract. You probably want a very, very incentive-based deal. But Cleveland didn't care, and now they probably have one of the worst quarterback situations in the NFL because Baker Mayfield doesn't want to play there. And we don't know how Deshaun Watson's going to go. But the best offseason move the Saints have made was definitely the one they did not make because of the fact that opened up so many different offseason moves for the New Orleans Saints. Now, the last segment of the video, I want to go ahead and talk about mandatory minicamp. At the end of the last practice today, which is Thursday, I'm recording this, Dennis Allen spoke with the media and he was asked about if he's expected to excuse anyone from mandatory minicamp practices because we saw that Cleveland excused Baker Mayfield from practice for the interest of their team or both sides or something like that. But Dennis Allen confirmed to everyone that he expects everyone to show up for mandatory minicamp, and if someone doesn't show up, that's not what he's expecting. There's something going wrong. But I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't panic about anything, especially what I'm about to mention, because I know a lot of fans are going to freak out when they hear this. But like we've been over several times, don't panic about anything until probably August. If this player isn't fully practicing or something's going on by August, then I would start to worry a little bit. And that's that Michael Thomas is not 100% still on that ankle. And Dennis Allen said he's probably not going to be participating at mandatory minicamp. I think Dennis Allen said that he was doubtful or something like that. So he's not going to be there. Now, a lot of fans are going to be like, oh my God, Michael Thomas is still injured. He's going to miss time again. Saints going to have no receivers again. No. Chill. It's going to be fine. I don't think this means much of anything. In fact, I think this is kind of what we expected, because in a few weeks ago, in one of my Saints OTA videos, we discussed Michael Thomas. And Dennis Allen had talked about how the expectation around the team and Michael Thomas was that he wasn't going to be expected to be ready to go until training camp. So training camp is still that target date, which is a little over a month from now, around the end of July. But even the end of July, which is the very beginning of practice, there's still no pads or anything going on there. So I really wouldn't expect Michael Thomas to be like, if he's 100% and he's fully practicing, I wouldn't really expect that till the early portions of August, when the team's getting ready for preseason. If he's not practicing by August, I say then we start to worry a little bit, because then preseason's starting and it won't be long before they start playing games. But we still have 3 months until the Saints play a game, because it's only the second week of June. So there's still 3 months until the Saints play a regular season NFL game. Michael Thomas, you probably won't even see him in the preseason anyway, just because he's that type of guy that doesn't really need to play in the preseason, kind of like Alvin Kamara. We know who he is. If he's still progressing with that ankle, we'll see him in practice, not on the field for preseason. But even training camp is still about a month and a half away, so I wouldn't trip about that. Don't panic yet. Don't panic yet. And even then, if Michael, something, not gonna bank on this happening. No one wants this, but the Saints have made all these moves at wide receiver so that if something does happen, it's gonna be okay. I wouldn't panic about any of that. But everyone is expected to be back for training camp, which is, mandatory minicamp, which is really good to see. And we'll probably see Michael Thomas practicing for training camp, which is at the end of July. That'll be good to see. That's kind of all the stuff I wanted to talk about today in terms of players and updates and stuff like that. Since it was the final week of OTAs, there's not as much news going around as there was the first couple weeks, because we saw Jarvis Landry, we saw Jameis Winston. Now, we've still seen all those players at practice, but there's just not much to talk about. There's just, they're kind of doing their thing. Whatever. Now, one thing I want to briefly mention, one more thing before we end the video. Adam Rank is an NFL. He's on the NFL Network, and he every year he goes game by game and predicts everyone's schedules and see where they're going to end up. And this dumbass somehow thinks the Saints are going 8-9. I'll probably have his predictions on the screen right now, but this dude is retarded. I cannot wait for the Saints to just fully prove everyone wrong this season, because I promise you they're not going 8-9. The Saints had 4 different starting quarterbacks last season and went 9-8. They also broke the NFL record for most starters played in a season, and they went 9-8. They had a winning record, and they were a Rams 17-0 lead away, because the Rams blew that 17-0 lead against the 49ers, and that's why they ended up missing the playoffs. If the Rams don't blow that 17-0 lead, the Saints are literally in the playoffs at the 7th seed, which is insane, with 4 different starting quarterbacks. Now, Jameis Winston's back. They got Jarvis Landry. They have Chris Olave. Michael Thomas is expected to be back. They still have Alvin Kamara. And, even though that Sean Payton's gone, Dennis Allen has been here a while, and he's not going to be running the offense. Pete Carmichael is going to be running the offense, and he's been here almost Sean Payton's entire tenure. So I wouldn't really expect the offense to change that much. It's not that big of a deal. So I'll probably make a video about this some other time, but the Saints are probably the most slept-on team in the NFL, because a lot of people are writing them off as, borderline, maybe not playoff contenders. But if everything goes right, the Saints are Super Bowl contenders, and I'm being dead ass when I say that. I'm being so serious. The Saints have a shot. The Saints will make the playoffs. I'm telling you right now, the Saints are going to be a playoff team, and if everything goes right, the Saints have a chance to compete for the Lombardi Trophy. Now we'll kind of dive deeper into that as the offseason goes on and the regular season continues to get closer. But that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on Ian Book, this new guy that I discussed, Kirk Merritt, I believe his name was. I already forgot. What do you guys think about these guys? Anything you want to say, mention, any suggestions, whatever. Let me know in the comments. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.